Welcome, everyone. Good evening. I'm so grateful that you are joining us tonight for the Men Are Caregivers Too, a real discussion with real men who care. And I have three of my dear friends who are willing to share their stories and their vulnerability with the greater community so that we can talk about this. And y'all, I'm moderating and being an admin person, so getting folks in the room. So we can talk about this invisible population of Black men who care. There are 40% of Black men who are caregivers to family members. And like I said, I have three friends who are with me today. And I would like you guys to introduce yourself to the audience, and then we will dive right into our discussion. So I am going to ask Chris to go first.
Good afternoon, Donita, and everyone on the call. My name is Chris Gaines. I am a former caregiver of my mother for over 13 years.
David.
Good evening, you guys. Excited about the conversation we're going to have this evening. I'm a full-time caregiver of my dad.
And Victor.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm also excited to open up a discussion about this topic, very well needed topic. I care for my 90-year-old mom. She just turned 90 on November 15th. And it seemed like it's been a lifetime, but at her greatest need, I would say maybe in the last 10 years.
Thank you. And I am Donita Brown, and I am a caregiver to my mom, the full-time sole caregiver to my mom. And I have, God has called me to create this community of caregivers through Hey Caregiver, which is a lifestyle brand for family caregivers and specifically Black family caregivers, because research shows that there aren't enough culturally competent programs for us as Black caregivers. And so I also founded the Benchi Circle, and I see some of my Benchi Circle's sisters on today. I'm so grateful that you joined us, your brothers. I've come up with a name for this group of men, the Moana tribe. Moana means son in Swahili, like Binti means daughter in Swahili. So, I'm just grateful to have this tribe of beautiful Black people that are really taking care of their family members. And Victor, I want to start with you. When did your caregiving journey begin?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think my caregiving journey began when I started really see, the fluctuation in my mom's behavior, her attitude, her volatility at times, anger. I remember her being in a senior center. I had arranged for her to go to a senior daycare during the day for a few days during the week. And, a lot of these characteristics started to come out in this senior center. As a matter of fact, one of the senior centers, literally, they put my mother out. They put my mother out of the senior center and suggested that the only way she could come back to the senior center is if she was medicated and had a caregiver at the senior facility. So which sounded quite insane. But that's kind of when, the need started to really kind of come to my attention, turn it up a notch with my mom.
How many years ago was that?
I would say that was probably back in 2013, 14. She had a couple of episodes where she had fallen. She's a diabetic. She had fallen, almost got hit by a bus on one occasion on the main street where we live, and ended up in the hospital. So that was, in my opinion, really the start to really getting help and focusing on some of the senior services in the county where I live. Because prior to that, I was really kind of doing things by myself. So that's hard enough.
Yeah, and that's what we talk about, support resources. Sometimes a lot of them aren't there, but we don't even know what is there and what's available to us. Chris, I'll ask you next because I know that you've had some experience with nursing homes when it comes to the care that you provided for your mom. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? How long you cared for her and when your journey began, and then some of your experience with nursing homes?
Sure. I started my caregiving journey about 15 years ago. My mother was a diabetic, just like Victor's. Her diabetes deteriorated to the point where she suffered a left leg amputation below the knee. This all occurred while she was living in Las Vegas, Nevada. So basically, it was a situation where the family made a decision that the caregiving responsibilities for our mother would fall to me. So we basically relocated her here to the Washington metropolitan area, and she was able to stay in a senior citizen's apartment. She was independent. She was able to get around on her own pretty much even with the amputation. And so I was basically able to get her set up and basically handle all of her financials, business-related activities, her grocery shopping, her day-to-day activities and things like that. So it was at first it was pretty overwhelming until it became a routine as far as managing it. Now, of course, over the course of from year 15 to probably year 10, in those 5 years, we saw a significant deterioration in her health as a direct result of diabetes, which basically left us with no choice to put her into an assisted living facility, AKA a nursing home, for her to be able to get the services that she needed. If I was to give any advice to anybody who ever had to dealing with an assisted living facility, as it should be in any situation where you're dealing with a loved one, is that the single most important thing you can become as a caregiver is an advocate. And that advocacy is very, very important when you're dealing with these nursing homes, because these nursing homes are only going to treat your loved one as well as they see you treat your loved one. And in addition to that requires spending a lot of time at the nursing home, spending a lot of time watching how they are caring for her in the nursing home. But equally as important is that you also have to understand what the actual caregiver who is giving care outside of your family to your parent or loved one when they're in a nursing home. What I mean by saying that is that probably the most difficult job that you can probably take on is someone who's in nursing or in caregiving, because you're dealing in an environment that is constantly depressing. You're constantly dealing with people's mortality, dealing with people's humility and things like that. And people are going to react to these caregivers in a way that will oftentimes be hostile, that will be disrespectful, et cetera, et cetera. My advice is do what I did, spend a lot of time at the nursing home initially, but also get to know every single person personally who is caring for your mother, and respectfully, meaning that you want to establish a rapport that is non-confrontational so that these people can feel like they can tell you and talk to you about anything that is actually going on. I mean, I knew all the shift people who were on the various shifts, and when they changed shifts, they all had my cell phone number. I talked to them personally when I went up there. I spent more time in some cases when I would visit the nursing home talking to staff in a respectful way to let them know, one, you're going to be caring for my mother. We are paying for you to care for my mother, and I'm going to be respectful of the fact that you do that. I am going to be here every day, and we are going to have constant dialogue about how this care is going to actually take place. You have to advocate, you have to be a partner with the nursing home and the facility when you do that. If you don't, they oftentimes do see quite a few people who basically just shove their parents into these nursing homes and leave them there. They are going to give as much care and attention to your family as you are going to give to them as caregivers as well. So it's important that you be an advocate and make time to actually get to know the people who are actually caring for your parent.
Yep. Thank you, Chris. And I totally agree with that. My mother, when she was in short-term rehab, I pretty much just moved in. I set up a cot in the room. I lived there until I got to know everybody. And if it was somebody that was on because they hire a lot of agency folks, if it was somebody that was on that I didn't feel comfortable with, I did not leave her there. But that is something that even with my Benji Circle group, as well as us, especially former caregivers, to create an advocacy arm of what we do so that for those folks that don't have a Chris, don't have a Donita, don't have a Victor to go and say, look, I need you to do this for my mother or this for my father, then we can be that voice for them, because everybody deserves the same level of care. Unfortunately, they're short staffed, but this is something like having these kind of conversations that I want to do more, where we can change some of what's going on in these nursing homes. So thank you, David. Last but not least, who you care for, when the caregiving journey started, and anything else that you want to share about that initial start of the caregiving journey.
Yeah, so again, thank you, Donita and Chris and Victor. Super timely conversation. For me, it started when my mother passed in 2017, and probably a year after my mom passed, we noticed cognitively my dad starting to decline. My brother and I were kind of both taking care of my dad. My brother moved into our family home in Baltimore. I live in DC. And so my brother was doing a lot of the day-to-day care, and then I would come to Baltimore every other day, check out my dad, take him to his appointments and things. And then my brother was diagnosed with cancer, and then as he started to get sick, we really transitioned my dad to live with me, and then my brother passed away last March. And so, with him passing away, my mom passed away, it was extremely rough. But it has definitely been, I spend more time with my dad than I probably spent with him since I was like 17, 18 years old. So it's definitely an amazing journey, being able to spend time with, the man that gave birth to me and was there for me, cared for me during my formative years. I think the best advice is you got to leverage family and friends. And I know oftentimes that can be difficult because a lot of times the caregiving solely rests on one person, particularly if there are multiple siblings. And a lot of times the other siblings say that they are in support, but a lot of times they are MIA. And so leveraging family is super important. But then I also think, and I think we talk about self-care in very abstract terms. It really sounds good. Donita, I'm glad that you and the Benty Circle were able to do a retreat. I would love for the brothers, for us to go camping or something to do a retreat, because I do think this notion of self-care and taking care of yourself is critically important. And because I'm able to kind of leverage family, I have an aunt in North Carolina that whenever I need her, she can come. I had to go to West Africa for 5 weeks over the summer. So it was just a matter of calling her, making the arrangements, and she was able to come up. And then, my children, I have adult children who are in college, but when they're home, they're able to help provide support. And so I rediscovered fishing. I used to fish when I was a little boy, but over the last 4 or 5 years, fishing has really saved my life. Just being able to be on the water and kind of decompress from the day to day. And so I would suggest to everyone, whatever it is, figure out a self-care regimen. It could be curling up with a book. It could be playing golf. I mean, whatever it is that gives you a sense of peace is critically important, that we kind of accelerate those self-care principles in our lives, those of us who are caregivers. I think it's super important, particularly for Black men, because as we were talking offline, when we look at rates of suicide among Black men, all too often, too many of us as Black men are suffering in silence. And so you think about just being a Black man in America, and then add to that, now you're a Black man in America who is responsible for taking care of one or more of your parents. And so, getting into therapy, figuring out networks, support groups for men. During the pandemic, I was fortunate enough to be able to help co-lead some international men's groups where we had men from Africa, from Canada, from Latin America. We would all kind of come together to talk about our self-care. And so again, I think for men, the self-care piece, the brotherhood, the checking on each other. I think oftentimes we got to go beyond the text message or the DM on Facebook, because a lot of times, as we just saw, Darnita, as you recommended, as you indicated with the brother Twitch, a lot of times we dress up well as Black men, we look the part, but we are literally crumbling inside. And again, I think with the added stress and sacrifice of being a caregiver can definitely be overwhelming.
Thank you for that, David. Victor, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did have a comment. Just great information from both David and Chris. My comment actually goes back to what Chris was referring to about the experiences or the need that you must have when you're interacting with those facilities, senior services, senior centers and places like that. That's important because at the end of the day, these facilities are a business. They are running a business. They are in it, and I hate to put it this way, they are in it to make money, and they make a lot of money. For example, my mother was in a senior facility for numerous months. And after, I saw that the ball wasn't moving the way I wanted it to move in my mother, and actually somebody really giving me some insight is that they want you to leave your parent there. They want you to leave them because they get to bill the insurance to the limit, to the fullest. And then when they tap out on that, then they send you the bill, the family the bill. So it took for me to actually, like Chris was saying, get to know everybody, the caseworker and the senior director, the nurse and everybody, and sit them down and to basically tell them, hey, if you don't, I gave them a week. And if they hadn't come back to me within that week with a plan for my mother, they said my mother wasn't ever going to even walk. And a week after that, I came in, packed my mother up, took her out of that facility. So, but that took a stance on my part. Like Chris was saying, getting to know these people and putting your foot in the right place and letting these folks know that I'm here. He does have an advocate that's going to speak on his behalf. So that's critical. My mother would have, like any other senior person, probably would have just remained in that facility.
And that's what typically happens. And so that could be very overwhelming, to David's point, overwhelming and stressful, right? So you're managing your life, your family, figuring things out at your home front, and then having to show up at the nursing home and then deal with these people. So it could wear on you, right? From a mental standpoint. And I think that that's where we are as caregivers. CDC says that caregiving is a public health priority and that our health is at risk. They also say that a lot, maybe 40%, I think, of caregivers who are caring with loved ones with dementia commit suicide or even have suicidal ideation because it's so overwhelming. And I think that that's where the vulnerability comes in. And with that, I'd like to share this clip that Victor shared with me of Jason Wilson, who is a caregiver to his mother. And just to show what it is like. I mean, you're hearing from these men right here live in the flesh, what it's like to be a male caregiver.
I didn't have my father around. My mom mothered and fathered me. When she developed dementia, I tried to care for her just being a masculine son. Like, mama, I'm gonna work hard. I get 2 jobs if I have to make sure I can pay for your medication. And I was about to have a nervous breakdown. And God told me clearly, he says, listen, if you think you're going to be able to care for your mother only being a masculine male, you can forget about it. She's going to need you to be compassionate, patient, long-suffering, tender. Those attributes don't fall under masculinity. I learned how to let go through loving her. Without that experience, I wouldn't be the man that I am today. I wouldn't be the teacher I am today. And my mother was the sensei who trained me.
So what I'll do, since there were, you couldn't hear or might have been not coming in clear, I'm going to share the link in the chat so that you all can take a look at it. But this is a great segue to men showing up, right, as strong and powerful and not vulnerable, not sensitive. We sometimes condemn men for being sensitive, right, for showing their feelings, for crying, all of those things. So in your caregiving journey, David, how did it affect you physically and mentally? Seeing not only, because yours was really a journey, right? So you saw your dad care for your mom, you lost your mom, then your brother was helping care for your dad, then you lost your brother, and then you were left caring now for your dad, but still having all of the loss prior to. So how becoming your father's caregiver, aside from the benefits which you shared, how did that affect you from a mental and physical?
I mean, it has definitely been initially definitely overwhelming. There was a lot of self-doubt given just the sheer magnitude of loss in my family. And I've lost my 3 closest cousins along the way we were all raised like brothers, given sort of the family loss. It has definitely been overwhelming, but I think for me, the silver lining is it really forced me to slow down. I mean, I've fortunately have been able to work from home for over a decade. And so outside of, my daily responsibilities, and I would do a lot of international travel, it forced me to really reprioritize some things, put some things on hold. It also forced me to get back into counseling, individual, counseling, to be able to help me navigate, the feelings of being overwhelmed. It also helped me realize that I got to tell people no, that I'm not as available as I was 2 years ago. So people always want me to come to all of these different things. I'm just not. I need to be home with my dad. If I'm not on the road working, then I need to be home. And so it made me really pivot in terms of prioritizing everything from, my schedule to, my business affairs, as well as understanding the importance of re-engaging my therapist and making sure that I'm meeting with my therapist on a regular basis. Because again, I think is one, either Chris or Victor talked about, it can just be overwhelming. My dad was in a skilled nursing home for a couple of months, and like Chris was saying, he was having really respectful, comment. Man, I'm ready to put the ski mask on and get the pump, because I was like, hold up. I was here yesterday and y'all were supposed to do these things. I come back today and they not done. And so that some of the advice that Chris and Victor gave, like, you can't just leave your loved one in a nursing home and you haven't been there in 4 weeks, or 3 weeks. I mean, it has to be, you have to go to the nursing home like it's part of your job. And so it, again, initially overwhelming, but really prioritizing things in my life and in my family life, family schedule. And I got 2 kids in college. And so I'm in a sweet spot. Everything is good.
Good. And I know that therapy helps, and again, that vulnerability. And I know, like with you, David, on the speaking circuit, author, all of the things, and you show up, right? Like you got everything is good, right? And like you say, it is a sweet spot, it's good, but because you get that support that you need through friends and your therapist, you're able to cope better. So, I mean, I think that's what we need to stop the stigma, right? Especially when we talk about, and Chris, you mentioned it earlier, when we talked about the mental health piece, that is a clinical term, and talk more about mental wellness and mental well-being. And I think that as caregivers, we suffer in silence. You know, we don't reach out, or people will see us doing what we need to do and see that, oh, they got it, you know. And so I think that that's where the statistics come in as far as caregivers suffering with depression, anxiety, you know, unhealthy habits, you know what I mean, overeating, drugs or whatever. And so how do you allow yourself to be vulnerable, Chris, as a caregiver?
Well, I think the first thing that I want to address is something that David said that I thought was very insightful when he talked about the simple task of fishing and how beneficial that is to him in terms of his ability to be able to decompress, to be able to gather himself, to be able to refocus himself. One thing that I've learned over the years, and unlike a lot of people, I'm very fortunate, and I always tell people this, you know, either professionally or not, that I work a job that I'm one of the few people who will adamantly tell you I love what I do. And the reason why is because I work in health, I have worked in health promotion and wellness. The point that I'm making is that when you start to think about these things, about what can we do in terms of how we're managing our stress levels, how do we deal with the feelings of being overwhelmed, there really is no one best way to approach that. I think it's for the individual to find those things that are meaningful to them. But what I've imparted off to a lot of people in either professional circles or even in personal circles, first and foremost, the single most important thing that you can do for your mental, physical, and personal well-being is understand the importance of breathing and taking a moment to really be in the moment of your breath and your breathing, and understanding that sometimes the best thing that you can do for yourself when things become overwhelming is stop. Just stop. Take a moment, get in a comfortable position, and try to breathe, because that will allow your blood to circulate and flow, and will allow yourself to very quickly regroup yourself. It may sound very simplistic, but the reality of it is that when we are going and going and going and going, and we feel like we have to continue to overcome these things, we don't take a moment to just invest the time in the simplest things that will give us the maximum benefit of engaging in that activity. The other thing is that, and I also try to impart upon people, is being mindful about what they're doing. The most overrated thing that we hear is that people who are successful at multitasking is overrated. Okay, first of all, the brain was never designed from its inception to do more than one thing well at a time. And the individual who says that they're great at multitasking is not being truthful to themselves. So you need to slow down and be in the moment of every single task that you take and every single thing that you do, if you are able to. It may not sound as easy. It may not be as easy as it sounds. But if you try to practice these simple 2 techniques during the course of your day, incrementally, you will start to realize that you will be able to plug yourself in a little bit better to your reality in your surroundings. I also think, as far as us as Black males are concerned, let's just be realistic. Probably the hardest thing in the world to be is probably a Black man in this society. The entire deck is stacked against us, and this does not minimize the things that our sisters go through as well, because we understand that they struggle as well. But having, once again, to advocate, because I am a Black man, we suffer and deal disproportionately. Every type of disease and chronic conditions we are disproportionately affected by. We have high rates of suicide in our younger parts of our community. And we also have an increased prevalence of suicide in other age groups. The bottom line is, a Black man in this country, the deck is stacked against you. What we fail to do is that as men is that we tend to want to feel like we can overcome any and everything. No, we cannot. And I think the first step that we have to make is making sure, and as David also said, there's nothing wrong with reaching out to a therapist and talking to somebody, because the reality of it is as we even talked about when we first started this, is that as Black men, we are the #1 caregiving group in this country. We need to be able to make sure that as we are putting out to be strong for other individuals, that we are taking those momentary times to be able to care for ourselves.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for that. And I truly, firmly believe that we have to take care of ourselves in order to take care of everybody else. If we don't take care of ourselves first, then we're no good for anybody else. And that, I have my moniker, the selfful caregiver, because I learned that I was selfless with my mother. I was doing everything for her. When I came from Africa and got home, hit US soil, it was all about her, dealing with the nursing homes, dealing with all of the stuff that goes along with it, the healthcare system, figuring out, is she gonna live? And just all of those kinds of things that I truly neglected myself. Like I lost myself in the caring of her. And then on the flip side, once things started to get better, we were back in the home. I was like, I felt guilty when I took time to do anything for myself. I felt like I was being selfish. And so I say that selfful is that sweet spot between selfish and selfless. Selfless is reckless. Doing stuff for yourself, do not feel guilty. It's not selfish. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. And we have to your point, David, say no and be unapologetic about it. We can't do everything and be everything for everybody. And then it's different. As caregivers, our lives are a little bit different. Spontaneity is no longer in the vocabulary. We have to sort things out before we do anything. Even if we do want to go out for a respite, you still have to plan. You have to make sure everything is in place. So to have that community around you that understand that, don't feel like, oh, you can't do, and get offended, like a community that really understands that. And I think that's the importance of caregivers supporting caregivers supporting caregivers, because we understand, like my mother's calling me now. Y'all understand if I go in there and say, girl, why are you yelling? I'm on this panel. You're not gonna look at me like I'm crazy, because you understand as a caregiver that things can get out of control sometimes. So with that said, support, right? So I'm gonna toss it over to you, Victor. Who and what do you go to for support?
Oh, wow. If you don't mind, real quick, I wanted to kind of just rewind before I kind of lose it in my mind. For me, it started off a little rough, getting to this point, doing a lot better, a whole lot better now in terms of this. But for me, it was having an experience of seeing what was really in my heart. So the matters of the heart. And I say that to say that once you realize that you are given this assignment, because a senior person, a parent, mother or father, can have multiple kids. I don't believe all those kids have the assignment. There may be one or two that have that assignment. And I think God is just so intentional with highlighting those that he knows he can trust with that parent. So for me, I'm my mother's only child. I'm married. I have a young son, but it was me that had to really get the ball rolling. And there was a time where I had to really deal with my own heart and come to grips with some things about myself, so that I could be there in the best posture for my mother that I could possibly be. So God had to break me down in some areas when I didn't understand, just really couldn't wrap my mind and my heart in most cases, in a lot of cases, around what was going on. So I just wanted to kind of just put that in the forefront. I didn't forget the question now, but that was important for me. You know, my wife and my son, they paid the price for that. They paid the price because my heart wasn't in the right place initially. When things were just exploding in front of me, I didn't necessarily have the answer nor the direction. When I was the social worker, I was the caseworker, I was the one that was on the phone doing all these things, thought I was putting some stuff in place. I wasn't doing anything really, but that's kind of where it started for me. But if with all due respect, if you don't mind, just ask me the question again so I can.
Well,
I just wanted to kind of put that out
I
there.
think you kind of answered it. You said that God kind of broke your support at that time was God. That's who you kind of leaned on in your time of struggle with your mom. And that you didn't, I asked you who and what do you do? Who do you lean on for support and what do you do for support? And so I think you kind of answered it, you know.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot deeper than that. I mean, I think through the process of really realigning my heart and really just waiting on God and trusting Him. I remember a good friend of mine told me, he said, you know, I hear you talking about you caring for your mom, but you never complained about it. You showed me how frustrated you were, and at times you were angry and upset and confused, but you never complained about it. I think because I allowed God to deal with my heart, at the core of it, everything I could possibly imagine started to fall out of the skies. All of the services, all of the care, the people, just strangers, it just came. The resources, money, you name it, diapers, and they still come, you know. But it was because God needed me to just readjust my heart and just have a totally different perspective, that he just opened up the floodgates and sent me everything that I needed and still is until today. So that was really, you know, that is at the core, at the base of what I've been dealing with and will until my mother leaves here. Just my
Amen.
relationship. So.
Yeah, amen. Thank you, Victor. And before we go into questions from the audience, I wanted to ask Chris and David, do you guys have any, would you like to add anything to what Victor is sharing?
I always harken back to one statement that somebody always told me when I lost my father, and I lost him under different circumstances than my mother, because my father passed away shockingly and suddenly, and it was a very traumatic experience for me. But somebody once told me that God never gives you more than you can handle. And I've always taken that on the hardest days when I was caring for my mother, when I was breaking down in the truck by myself, dragging myself here and there, knowing that I had to continue to do this. And I think, as Victor said, the calling to caregiving is a calling. It is really a calling. You know, we have siblings. I have a brother who lives in Texas. And when the decision was made that I was to be the caregiver, the family sat down and they said, it's on you. And not because they said that not because they neglected me or they didn't give me support, but they knew that because of the relationship my mother and I had, that it would be best that I was the one to actually provide care for her. So in that regard, I can understand that, Victor, because, you know, you go through, and everyone on this line knows, you go through trials and tribulations that no other individual can possibly understand unless they have walked this walk and been in these shoes, because there's those days where you are alone and you are with God and you are thinking to yourself, how am I going to possibly make it the next day? Not for me, but I have to do this for somebody else. And I also remember, it was interesting, I had a coworker of mine who was going through the exact same thing that I was going through. And I told him, you know, when my mother passed, I said, you know, sometimes the thing that really got me through on a day-to-day basis when it was really hardest is that he would ask me every day, how's your mother doing? And we would always exchange that same greeting, knowing that we were both going. He was leaving work, going to the nursing home. I was leaving work, going to the nursing home. The next morning, we always greeted each other the same way. And it wasn't like we greeted each other in front of people. It was just him and I, and we always greeted each other the same way. So yeah, this whole caregiving thing, the strength and intestinal fortitude you have to show, it's truly, as an individual, is truly a calling.
Can I say just one quick thing, Donnie? The reason why I understand that the matters of the heart matter is because I would challenge anybody that gets to whatever their calling is in the caregiving atmosphere, is that if you do go into it, you don't deal with your heart, those things will show up in the most ugliest way. All of those things about you, whoever you are, will show up ugly if you don't deal with your heart. They won't be about the person that you're caring for. They'll be about you, individual.
And I just wanted to add two things really quickly. And thanks, Chris and Victor, because you guys have been doing this a lot longer than me. But the first thing is this is going to visit every family. Every family will have to make a decision, even for the folks that are, streaming in the building. At some point, every family is going to have to make a decision how we're going to care for the elders. So that's the first thing I want you to think about. The second thing is Dink and I have been having some extensive conversations, and I'm pushing Dink because I want us to do an anthology, because I'm a writer, and I want us to do an anthology because the caregiving story, particularly of Black Americans, is not being told. This is in our DNA. When you think about the Black caregiver tradition, and Dink knows this because
shameless plug. I have a T-shirt for that. T-shirts for that. It's in our DNA. I got a T-shirt for that.
And I need to order that T-shirt. Dink knows this because she spent time in Africa like me. That this whole thing about shoving family members in nursing homes, it just don't happen, because the expectation is the village, the extended family, will care for the elders until they become ancestors. So this thing about just shoving our parents into nursing, and then sometimes it's unavoidable, based on medical circumstances. But that's something that in the Yoruba people call white folks, man, I done lost the term real quick. Oyimbo. That's something that Oyimbo does. White folks do that. That's not part of who we are. And so, but again, understand that every family will have to make this decision, how we're going to care for the loved ones. And so these conversations need to continue. We need to be open. We need to be honest, and we need to expand these networks to be able to have these conversations. Because here's what's crazy. The more I talk about it, the more people I meet who are dealing with the same situation. When I got to Ghana, moved into the university, my roommate, we was up one night, we was up late at night. And then as we started talking, found out that he's in Atlanta, he's caring for his mom. He's a full-time caregiver. I'm in DC caring for my dad. And so again, so many of us are dealing with this phenomenon that we got to really, expand best practices, help folks, disseminate more information. All of that stuff is critically important.
Absolutely. And to your point, no longer being our voices now, we just need to amplify them. Our voices now are marginalized, but we need to amplify our voices and show that we're out here. And to your point about it's in our DNA, that's one of the issues, is that we don't identify as caregivers, right? So when they're doing statistics, it's what you say, Oyimbo, that's the white folks?
Oyimbo.
Oyimbo. So the Oyimbo, they say, yeah, I care. I got trust set up. I got my home is in the state. It's all this, and I care. So when you look at the statistics of caregivers, you see 60-some% of white folks, right? And we are down in the teens or 10 as Black folks and other Hispanic, other people of color. So we have to say, you know what, yes, I'm a caregiver, you know, and I have t-shirts for that too, you know, to wear it proudly, to say, listen, this is what I am doing, right? And because of how we've been raised, you know, grandmother, everybody remember Big Mama in the dining room, you know, setting up the space for her, but it wasn't a thing. Like nobody said I'm Big Mama's caregiver, right? It's just what we did. So now saying, yes, I identify as a caregiver, we need resources, we need support as Black family caregivers. And so I think that we are the group to make it happen. I'm so grateful that you all, you know, are here and being vulnerable and sharing your stories. This is not the last conversation. It may be the first, and we're going to continue. But I wanted to know if anyone in the audience had any questions before we wrap this up. And you can either put it in the chat or raise your hand to speak. Yes, once a man, twice a child. We're going to all be there at some point. And Rosalind Carter, who's Jimmy Carter's wife, said that there are 4 kinds of people in the world. There are those who have been caregivers, those who are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. So we're going to be on that spectrum at some point. Any questions? Oh, excuse me 1 second. Somebody said check for your live questions. If you could help me, Robin, I'm gonna tell you, I am a novice with all of this. So if you see some questions on live, you let me know. You could be my admin. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? No? Going once, going twice. Okay.
How forthcoming is the audience that nobody has at least one question? Somebody has a question.
Maybe y'all
I will say this, Donita Brown. This is Chris Barnes. I'm actually my caregiving never stops. You know, as caregivers, I'm sure you guys wear multiple hats, and I'm actually wearing a daddy hat right now because I'm dealing with some stuff with my daughter. But I do want to say kudos to you, Dink, for making sure that we all stay connected in this way. Because I think one of the things that I think in my experience, this is actually before me being a caregiver to my mom, which I am now. I was supporting my cousin being a caregiver to my uncle, her dad. And I went to a Alzheimer's support group because she couldn't make it. It was a mandatory thing. Well, not necessarily mandatory, but it was something that she needed to attend. And I learned so much about caregiving, especially for dementia patients. And one of the things I learned was this whole thing about making sure that you guys take care of yourselves. So I'm just going to make sure that at some point we have some conversation around that, because I think that's really, really important that we make sure that we take care of ourselves, because you're not any good to anybody if you don't take care of yourself.
Thank you, Chris. You logged on late, but we did. But we can certainly talk about it.
No, I did log on late. I'm sitting there, my daughter, we had to call a tow truck.
We touched on it.
We had to call a tow truck. My daughter just ran up on a curb.
Oh, goodness. And that's another thing. You know, life never stops for caregivers, and especially we're in that sandwich generation. So you're taking care of your kids and you're taking care of your parents. And so again, even to have that support within to understand that, hey, y'all, we need some help, and not being ashamed of asking for it, because it's very important. Any other questions or comments?
Yes. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
How you doing? My name is Lamont. I thank everyone. Thank you, for bringing us together for this this group. And I just had maybe a couple of questions. I would just, well, my parents right now, they're getting to be at that stage right now where I'm being more and more active in their lives, doing a lot of things for them. But I just want to know, have you gentlemen ever, or ladies, have ever experienced where one of your parents may have told you, you need to go on with life, and don't worry about me. I'll just die right here. I mean, how do you guys experience that? Because they your parents kind of feel guilty, like go on with your life and just let me die. How do you guys actually deal with that?
I heard it on numerous occasions, and I'm sure we can all relate to this as our parents deteriorated. I know when mine deteriorated, it was coming to her home and picking her up off the floor. And she was always very apologetic of the position that she was putting me in because, she wanted me to continue on. You have to power through. Like we have all agreed upon, caregiving is a calling. And this is what our parents, it's funny because our parents don't envision this for us, but deep down inside, they're proud of us because we take on this responsibility. Then, it's counterintuitive for someone to tell you, I'm so glad you're caring for me, when they want to see us do other things with our life, especially if we're successful or whatever. You have to power through because it will not be the first thing that you will hear. It will not be the first experience that will test you. But if you are assuming that role, then you are just going to have to basically power through. Trust God, trust your instincts, trust the people that are closest to you, and understand, brother, that you are doing the right thing.
Thank you.
Can I add something to that, Anita?
Oh, go ahead, Vic.
I'm sorry. That showed up in my space with my mom in a way where we both, but particularly her, realized that she was losing something. Not just her senses in her mind, but her freedom, her independence. So a lot of the things that she said to me, came across, kind of edgy, little on the rough side, just, kind of nasty. And I didn't understand that. And I think it was because she was able to really kind of see that she was losing these things. And the flip side is that, I was the one having to take some things too, in some cases, and to keep her safe and to keep my family and our house safe. So a lot of those things that she would say would come really from a place of guilt sometimes, some shame, just like her not really understanding herself what was going on. So that's why I will revert back to just the matters of the heart, Lamont. When you know what's in your heart and your responsibility and your role and the assignment that you have, then really nothing that your parents say to you will really shake you. You know that just comes with the territory. That just comes with what's going on, and it's like you go to the beach and you can't judge when that wave is going to come in, when it's going to go back out. You just got to learn to surf. You got to learn to swim. You got to learn to get in there and just begin to adapt with them and be there and have that compassion. That's just in fact what Jason was talking about in the video. Hopefully the people on the call will get a chance to just, that guy's a phenomenal guy, man. He's a martial arts expert. And my son, I showed my son a clip on YouTube where he was doing a presentation with children, young Black kids. That's what he's into, where this child could not break the board. And Jason was teaching this guy. He got down on his level. That's what we need to do. Get on the level of our parents. And he got down on that level, on that child's level, and basically walked him through not giving up. Walked him through not giving up until he broke that board. And some of his books, a lot of his books reflect that, battle cry and things like that, that basically teach from that young age, young men, that it's okay to cry. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be angry. Work through your anger and talk through it. And some of those things that your mom or your sibling that you care, they may make you angry. But you gotta find a way to get through that, push, break that board, and be there and stand in the gap for your parent. Let me tell you, at the end of it, it's about you being able to have given the best that you could give, and that God says to you, well done, my good and faithful servant, so that you have peace, not strife when they're gone, but so that you have peace.
Mm-hmm. And if I can add really quickly, Donita and everybody, because I know you got some other questions. You know, my children, well, they're not even children. I have young adults. I mean, two in college. I'm having the difficult conversation with my children about what it may look like taking care of me and my wife in the years to come. And that's a conversation that we got to have, because I don't think that we do a good job from generation to generation preparing folks for the inevitable. We're going to get old and we're going to die. And I know that that's a very difficult conversation, but we all, for those of us that have children, you know, we got to have that conversation with our children, because just like all of us, every family will have to discuss this whole caregiving role at some point. All of us are going to get old and die. And who's going to care for us as we get older?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I say that we need to, again, not be afraid of having those conversations. It's a real conversation. We think about death, we think about dying, we think about planning as morbid. No, it's not. It's being very smart and very intentional about how you want to live and die. You know what I mean? Like we know how we want. We can tell you what we want to do in our lives, but when we talk about, well, how do you want to die? People looking at you like, what? You know, like we're trying to kill them off. But I think it's very important to have these conversations when everybody is in their sound mind, everybody is physically well, everybody can make their decisions for themselves, and sit at the table, have the conversations with your children, and also you're modeling the behavior of taking care of your parent to your children. So it's almost that thing that it'll probably just happen organically. We have a question for you all as Black men. How do you manage your caregiving roles when situations become too stressful?
I can maybe try to answer that. You know, the one thing that I continue to reapply and put in place in my scenario with my mom is actually like what all three of us or all of us are talking about, talking to our kid. But my mother lived what I'm giving her. So she raised me in a way where I saw her totally sacrifice for me and just work 2-3 jobs to care for me. So not that she probably ever imagined that it would be the flip one day. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But the thing that really continues to keep me motivated is the very thing she trained me up to be. So I'm exercising, I'm carrying out that training of not giving up, of just, being, persevering and just fighting through. And, my mother was very systematic with her whole life, very organized, very, very detailed. And that's really the thing that, in the morning when I wake up, I'm like, God, I don't even know how I'm doing it. It's gotta be you, because you're the ones, just my mornings with her, they get up, they're very early. I get up, get her up, but they're just very systematic, like boom, 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 boom. And that's because she taught me to be that way. So to be able to recognize that and deploy that now in this has really been, the safe haven for me. So.
Thank you, Victor. Chris, David, you like to piggyback?
Really quickly, I also think it's a spiritual battle. I mean, when we think about what we are charged with doing, and then understanding our faith and belief, and just something I think Chris said, God is not going to put anything on us that we can't handle. I mean, I also think it's the spiritual ideals, the spiritual values that we come to this place in terms of how we care for our families and how we move on. That are the things that can, really help us move forward. And then the connections, the relationships. I just believe relationships are so critically important to, particularly for Black men, our ability to connect with each other outside of football and all that other entertainment, being able to cry together, being able to fellowship together, being able to say, brother, I'm hurting. My mom fell yesterday. My dad was admitted to the hospital, whatever it is, us getting to that place where we can be really transparent. I think those are the things that help us deal with the tough times.
And one of the questions basically kind of alluded to that. It says, how often do you intentionally connect with other male caregivers? Anybody?
Like I had mentioned before, I have a gentleman that I work with who was going through it at the exact same time that I was. And it's just a different connection. You have your friends, you have your associates, and as David said, beyond football, doing whatever you're doing and all that stuff that entertain us, being able to connect with somebody who can really understand what it is that you're dealing with in a very organic way, in the sense that it doesn't have to be a session, so to speak. You just know that when that person is speaking to you and they're asking you, how's your family doing? How's your mother doing? They're going through the exact same thing. So when I say to them, on days when it's really tough, I said, you already know how this is. He's like, yep, I'm dealing with the same thing. It's those types of connections that kind of push you through. I think the other part of it is, once again, is that this whole idea about caregiving is a calling. When you have other siblings who can't do it or are being, and it's just like with my brother, who I love dearly, he knew he wasn't going to be able to do this, but there has never been a time, and he lives in Houston, Texas. There had never been a time when I needed to talk to somebody that he would stop what he was doing just to talk to me. And he made routine visits up here. He said, why don't you go do what you got to do? So that way that you can feel better, you can take a break or whatever. So it's really about, having those people that you can connect with.
Hey, Donita, this is Larry. Can I speak?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
First, I'd like to thank you and David, Chris, and Victor for your words. Sometimes it's kind of hard for Black men to really open up and speak. I want to piggyback on David just speaking about having that circle. What got me through with my mom and caregiving for her, and when she passed, God put it in my heart to do discipleship at my church, and with that, doing discipleship during that time, it really helped me get through mentally to deal with the caregiving and the passing of my mom, and then my stepdad not 2.5 months afterwards. And then during that time, also helping my wife caregive for my mother-in-law. So God was centered in giving me that strength to get through as a young Black man, to get through what I had to get through during that time. And with my discipleship brothers in my circle and helping me get through, it was a plus. So it's always good to have that circle around you, especially in times when you're sitting by yourself and you're doing a lot of thinking and you don't know what direction to go. And you get that phone call from a friend or a discipleship brother or who it may be, family member, they give you words of encouragement. So we always need that as Black men. And it's just, Donita, I thank you for putting it out, because it's not enough said as far as Black men caregiving for parents, aunts, or whoever. Sometimes it's always looked at as the women caregiving, and no every people oversee the Black men caregiving as well.
Thank you, Larry. That's so true. And that's why we felt that it was very important to have this conversation. Like I mentioned, I believe that a tribe is a vibe, that you have to have your tribe. And the Moana tribe is made up of caregivers like the Benji Circle, former caregivers as well, because I really strongly believe that former caregivers can help those that are in the space of caregiving and those that will become caregivers. It's a very important to share your experience with others and be there for others because you've been through the process and you've gone through the journey. So thank you for that. Any final thoughts as my mother calls me and bangs on the table?
Donita, Chris Graham. Donita?
Yes, hey Christopher
Hi.
Graham. We
Hi,
got a
how
lot
are
of
you?
Chris's on tonight.
Yes. How you doing? How's everything?
I'm good. How are you?
Everything is fantastic and amazing. So I've been listening. I just wanted to chime in and to, all the brothers who are on the panel. I was a caregiver for my mom and for my dad at the same time. And I just want to encourage you guys to, strengthen yourself and find some things that strengthen you, because you're going to go through this. And one of the biggest things that you're going to have to learn is forgiveness. And what I mean in forgiveness is that biblically it says, you're getting, get understanding. And what that means is that everybody around you does not understand what you're going through. So sometimes, you cursing people out, in your mind, and you're just mad at people because, they're pulling at you and they're trying to get you to do other things that they want you to do, but you're overwhelmed. You're drowning, but they don't know. So I'll tell a story. There's 3 young ladies that I grew up with, and they're tight. They hang out all day, every day, everything they do together. And so one of the girls, her mom got sick. And so, they would always go out and they're calling her and she's not showing up. She's not picking up the phone. She's not calling. And they're like, why are you treating me like that? Why are you treating us like that? And she's like, well, I got to take care of the things I got to take care of. They were like, all right, whatever. And as months go by and it's still the same thing. Months later, one of the other girls, her mother gets sick. And now her mother develops breast cancer and she's, going through it. And she just said, wow, now I understand why you wouldn't return my calls, because she had no understanding of what it meant to be a caregiver and how much work and time it takes. The other friend, her mother ended up getting breast cancer as well and died within 3 months. And so that bond, it kind of brought them together. And, sometimes everybody's not going to understand what you're going through. So sometimes you just got to tune everything out and plug forward and, don't have any animosity towards, family members who you think or feel should be there. Everybody ain't built like you. You got to do what you do, and it's your journey, and everybody's journey is different. And you're going to meet people along the way that may not be in your family that's going to encourage you and, pull you through. So that's it. And keep them going.
Thank you so much, Chris. And that's so true. It's the folks that you least expect to step up and really stand in the gap for you as it pertains to caregiving and supporting what you do as a caregiver. So I want to be mindful of time. It's 8:10. We're entering into the holiday season. Like, this is my last thing of the year for Hey Caregiver and the Benty Circle. And I am just so grateful that you all are here with me, here sharing, and the folks that are on the chat. Like I said, several of my Benty Circle sisters are on, my Soras are on. I am just grateful that I'm grateful. I'm just grateful. Like you say, it's a calling, not just a calling to care, but that God even put it on my heart. Like, Chris saw me when I started off as the wellness coordinator at CMS. And like you said, Chris, I absolutely loved my job. Like, that was the best job in the world. But God called me to volunteer in Eswatini, Africa, where I had no indoor plumbing and had to walk miles and miles, a day. But he prepared me for this calling to take care of my mother. My life has changed. My mindset has changed. So know that wherever you are on the journey, that God is in control. And we are all here to support. So thank you for my sister tribe. Thank you for my brother tribe. I think maybe we can do a panel discussion with both sides. And I mean, I think there are some big things that's going to happen because we have some powerful folks. We're not just caregivers. Outside of caregivers, we're authors, we're federal government leaders. You know, we are podcasters. We are doing the daggone thing. We're chefs. We're just everything. So I feel like we have so much more to offer and so much more to share with the greater community. So I thank you. I wish you all happy holidays. Do you all have any last any final thoughts that you want to share?
I got a little something down there that just happened about 3 weeks ago in my house. We all oftentimes talk about, you know, the adverse effect that COVID has had, you know, and we didn't talk about that now that we necessarily have to give COVID any more credit. But in most cases, COVID has, you know, devastated people's lives and taken lives. But I believe that COVID also has blessed. Somehow, some way, COVID has blessed. And 3 weeks ago, I'm at work, and my wife, who was on the call as well, called me because my mother, she didn't look right. She knew something was wrong. She tried to FaceTime me to, you know, just to see, just so I can see the condition of my mom's face. And I knew immediately that something was wrong. And my mother, you know, has been a diabetic. The first point is that had it not been for my wife being home for the past 3 years from work because of COVID, I would have lost my mom 3 weeks ago. My mother, her blood sugar had dropped so low that she had pretty much entered, or had begun to enter into a diabetic coma. It was because of COVID, again, that my wife has been working from home for 3 years, that when it was her turn to come downstairs and check on my mother and give her her lunch, that she found her. We were able to call the ambulance and get help. So that happened two days in a row. She finally ended up going to the hospital. But the awesomeness out of all of that is that after spending 9.5 hours in the hospital, coming home from the hospital, and because she had gone there before her blood sugar in the hospital, you know, didn't even bother to check what her A1C was. Like any diabetic knows that, like, that's critically important, that her primary care doctor ended up taking her off of her diabetes medication completely. So because of the diet that we have had my mother on for the past 5 or 6 years, the medication that she was on was actually doing her more harm than it was good. Her diet has gotten her blood sugar, like her A1C last was 5.5. So technically you're not even a diabetic anymore, technically, according to the standard. So that I wanted to say that because I could be on this call talking about how I lost my mom 3 weeks ago, but instead, you know, she's still here. And because my wife was diligent and coming downstairs at the right time and calling 911 and getting the help, a couple of things happened, saved her life and got her off the nasty medication.
Amen. Thank you for sharing that, Victor. And to your point, when you have a spouse, they organically become a co-caregiver in your role as a caregiver to your parent. So, you know, that's a blessing in and of itself, you know, that Renee was able to recognize from being there that something wasn't right with your mom. So, you know, when you get married, and I'm not married, I'm single, but when you get married, right, you take it on, we become one. So one, like I'm caring for my mother, so that means that you're gonna care too, just by default. So thank you for sharing that. I mean, so a lot of the stories that we've shared tonight, they're layered. It's so much more that we can talk about. I mean, we could talk about being a married caregiver. What toll does it take on your spouse? We could talk about being a single caregiver. What toll does it take on your dating life? You know, so there's so many conversations within the greater conversation that we can certainly tap into. So David and Chris, you have any final thoughts before we log off?
Yeah, just right quickly, Darnita and the brothers, I want to thank y'all for being on this panel today. I think it was a wonderful experience, and it was very cool meeting some good brothers who share similar experiences. So Darnita, keep up doing what you're doing. I know it's been a passion of yours, and it's evident, and it shows in all your energy. You have a glow about you when it comes to this, and I think that that's outstanding. And I just wanted to thank everyone who participated today. And it's good to know that we have colleagues and brothers and sisters who are going through the same thing that we can reach out to. So thank you all very much.
And super quickly, thank you, Dink. We're gonna get you a date. I wrote that in my notes section. So the brothers, we on if we on post, we're gonna send Darnita out on a date. But again, Darnita and I have been talking. We really want to do this anthology, looking at this whole idea around the Black caregiver tradition is in our DNA. So you guys will be seeing something from us, and we're going to allow folks to write essays, male or female, to write essays about the whole caregiving tradition for Black folk, because it's not being talked about. So stay tuned. You guys are going to see something come from us in 2023.
I was trying to
for the opportunity.
I was trying to pull up my website. I want y'all to go, everything we talked about tonight. I got a t-shirt for all of it. So, so check out the heycaregiver.com shop. I will be having holiday sales. So yes.
Post the link.
There it is. It's right there. Yeah, it's right there. So also, I told David before we jumped on, I say he's a doula. Like, and we talk about roles, gender roles. You typically hear the word doula when you talk about women, right? But David will help you birth your purpose, your passion, a book, a flyer, a poster, anything. He will help you get it done. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Like I said, David and Chris are both my mentors within my professional life, my personal life. Victor, when we talked for the very first time, like I say, I've been knowing Victor for a number of years through his wife. But when we talked for the first time, we were on the phone for, I know, close to 2 hours, just talking about our story, our caregiving stories and our journey. So I just thank you. Like I say, this is the first conversation. It will not be the last. If you all have any questions, comments, feel free to just hit me up at Donita@heycaregiver.com. And I will also share if you guys can put your emails in the chat as well. That way, if someone has a question for you, I have a WhatsApp group. If you are a daughter, a Black daughter caring for your parent, or you were a former caregiver for your parent that they're now your guardian angel, please feel free to reach out so we can add you to the Binti Circle. And likewise for the men, if you are caring for a parent, please reach out to me so we can add you to the Moana tribe. And I think that the conversation, we have a WhatsApp group and we talk about everything within that chat. And we should not be in a silo, just our own little bubble as caregivers. We definitely need community. And like I say, community of people that are like you, your tribe, like-minded and life-minded. So thank you so much. Have a great evening, everyone. Happy holidays. And we are looking forward to 2023 when we do that anthology, right, Miller? Yes. All right. So, okay. So everybody's sharing their email addresses. Awesome. Awesome. So, and if you would like a copy of the recording, please send me an email as well so that I can send it to you. And again, it's Dawnita, DAWNITA @heycaregiver.com. So thank you all. Happy holidays. Best wishes for a blessed, safe, healthy, and prosperous new year. I'm putting it out there that I'm praying for income this year. I've been an unpaid caregiver and have not had a steady income since 2016 when I became a volunteer. 7 is the number of completion. So we're going to say that in 2023, we're putting an end to no income in the name of Jesus. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you all. Have a good one. I'll definitely be in touch. Bye-bye.